2 Samuel 18. A father stands on a city wall, waiting for news from the battlefield. His army is fighting rebels, but the rebel leader, his own son. A messenger arrives, out of breath. "Victory, my lord! Your enemies are defeated!" The father doesn't ask about the battle. He asks, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" The messenger hesitates, then delivers the words that will break this father forever. "May all your enemies end up like that young man." Absalom is dead, and King David collapses, weeping, wailing, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son, if only I had died instead of you." This is the story of Absalom, the most handsome man in Israel, the prince who had everything, who murdered his brother, seduced a nation, and tried to assassinate his own father. This is Bible Cold Case, the family betrayal that became civil war.
Absalom was legendary for his beauty. 2 Samuel 14:25 says, "In all Israel there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot, there was no blemish in him. His hair alone was famous." The text says that when he cut it once a year, it weighed 5 pounds. 5 pounds of thick, black, flowing hair. This wasn't just vanity, it was his identity, his power, his brand. He was King David's third son, charming, charismatic, a natural leader, the kind of prince people loved. But everything changed when his sister Tamar was raped. Amnon, David's oldest son and Absalom's half-brother, became obsessed with Tamar. He faked being sick, lured her to his room, and raped her. Then, filled with self-disgust, he threw her out like trash. Tamar was destroyed. She tore her robe, put ashes on her head, and went to live in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman, the text says. And David? He was furious, but he did nothing. Amnon was his firstborn, his heir, so David protected him. Absalom watched his sister live in desolation, and he watched his father do nothing. So Absalom decided, if the king won't give justice, I will. But he didn't act immediately. He waited 2 full years, letting Amnon think he'd gotten away with it, letting David think it was over. Then Absalom threw a feast, invited all the king's sons, got Amnon drunk, and gave the signal. His servants stabbed Amnon to death at the dinner table. Absalom fled, and for 3 years he lived in exile, knowing he'd murdered the heir to Israel's throne.
After 3 years, Joab, David's general, convinced the king to bring Absalom back. But David had one condition: he must go to his own house. He must not see my face. For 2 more years, Absalom lived in Jerusalem, but couldn't see his father, couldn't approach the palace, couldn't be acknowledged as a prince. And that rejection, it radicalized him. Absalom didn't want forgiveness, he wanted power. And if his father wouldn't give it to him, he'd take it. So he launched the most brilliant political con in biblical history. Every morning, Absalom would go to the city gate, where people came to seek justice from the king, and he'd intercept them. "Where are you from? What's your complaint?" "Oh, your case is valid and proper, but the king has no one to hear you. If only I were appointed judge, I would give you justice." And here's the move that sealed it. When people bowed to him, he'd pull them up and kiss them, treat them as equals, make them feel seen. 2 Samuel 15:6 says, "Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel." He didn't seize power, he seduced it, made people want him to be king. For 4 years he did this, 4 years of building loyalty, recruiting followers, promising a better kingdom under his rule. Then he made his move. Absalom went to Hebron, David's first capital, a city with symbolic power, and there, surrounded by supporters, he declared himself king. The rebellion had begun, and the message reached David: the hearts of the people are with Absalom. David, the mighty warrior who'd killed Goliath, conquered nations, built an empire, had to flee his own capital, barefoot, weeping, running from his son. Absalom entered Jerusalem victorious, And to make his rebellion irreversible, he did something unthinkable. He set up a tent on the palace roof and publicly slept with his father's concubines, a declaration to all of Israel that there was no going back, no reconciliation, only war.
David regrouped his forces. The showdown came in the forest of Ephraim. Before the battle, David gave one order to his commanders: "Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake." Even now, even after everything, David couldn't stop being a father. The battle was brutal. 20,000 men died, but the forest itself became a weapon. More soldiers died from the terrain than from swords. And then it happened. Absalom, riding his mule through the forest, passed under a massive oak tree. His famous hair, 5 pounds of thick black hair, got caught in the low-hanging branches. The mule kept going, and Absalom was left hanging, helpless, suspended between heaven and earth. A soldier saw him and ran to Joab. "I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree." Joab was furious. "Why didn't you kill him? I would have rewarded you." The soldier replied, "I wouldn't lift my hand against the king's son. We all heard David's command." But Joab didn't care about David's feelings. He cared about ending the rebellion. He took 3 javelins, found Absalom still alive, struggling in the tree, and plunged all 3 into his heart. Then 10 of Joab's armor-bearers surrounded Absalom and finished him off. They threw his body into a pit and piled rocks over it. No royal burial, no honor, just a heap of stones in a forest. When David heard the news, he went up to the room over the gate and wept, walking back and forth, saying over and over, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." So what went wrong? Absalom had everything: beauty, charisma, political skill, royal blood. He could have been a great king if he'd waited, if he'd earned it, if he'd reconciled with his father. But he couldn't wait, and he couldn't forgive. The rape of Tamar broke something in him. His father's inaction broke something more. And instead of healing, he let bitterness turn into murder, murder into exile, exile into ambition, and ambition into treason. The tragic irony, the very thing that made Absalom famous, his hair, became the instrument of his death. His beauty, his pride, literally trapped him. And David? He'd failed as a father long before Absalom rebelled. He'd failed Tamar by not punishing Amnon. He'd failed Absalom by ignoring him for 2 years. His family was a disaster of his own making. But even after Absalom tried to kill him, even after Absalom humiliated him, David still loved his son, still mourned him, still wished he could have died in his place. That's the mystery. Not how Absalom died, but how a father can love a son who wanted him dead. This is Biblical Cold Case. The prince who had everything, lost it all, and died hanging from a tree. What do you think? Was Absalom a villain or a victim? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story gripped you, hit subscribe. More family betrayals, ancient mysteries, and cold cases from Scripture coming every week. Don't miss the next one.